Season 2 has been very different to season 1. It's the stuff that people have reached out to us about. There was the mixed race episode that we did this season.
It really blew up on all the platforms: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn. It was just blowing up in ways that I couldn't have ever imagined. God forbid that you go through domestic violence in your relationship. You then go through that and then nobody even understands and nobody's prepared and nobody's equipped and they don't even know that it's a problem. So you're left holding a horrific experience on your own, not being understood. And I think that was the thing that saddened me the most, is that even the professionals didn't understand it. Some of them had never even thought that it might be different, or that they might need to know something about the queer experience of domestic violence, or that it could even be different.
Domestic violence, particularly when it comes to people of colour like myself, is often avoided, or it's whitewashed, or it's just completely misunderstood. And for me, that episode was the first time that I actually felt seen. Now, my past experiences don't shape who I am today. I don't see myself as a victim. I am absolutely a survivor.
You're right, you are a survivor, and survivors have scars, but they are scars. It's a part of you, but it's not all of you.
Roots and rigor, rigor and flow. Roots and rigor, rigor and flow. Roots and rigor, rigor and flow. Rigor and flow.
One.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Tired. I've had a week of production. And let's just call it that.
You are in the post-production haze. Production is relentless.
It really is.
So do you feel shell-shocked?
I wouldn't say I feel shell-shocked. I just feel like production just takes a lot out of you. Being on set, shooting stuff just takes a lot, and there's a lot of processing that happens, and that's what I would say.
Do you want to talk about any of your processing?
No, not really.
Okay.
There's nothing really to talk about. I think we've covered all the things that we need to cover behind the scenes.
Excellent. So should we tell... We have a show?
Yes, we have a show. This is Rigor and Flow with me, Aiwan.
And me, Tamanda. And it's the show where business meets love.
And culture meets critique.
Right. We have literally made it to the end of season 2. Can you believe it?
Yes, I can believe it.
You can, why? Because you feel it so directly
because
in
it's
your
production.
being. Okay.
And production is really hard. And I think getting to 2 seasons is quite I think people don't realise that, a lot of people think podcasting is this easy thing. And I always say there's podcasts and then there's podcasts.
Yeah.
And when I say that, it's not to denigrate any form of podcast, but there are podcasts where it's literally just, people just grab a mic, any mic, plug it in, if they even plug it in. Because I see people with, fancy mics, and then the audio is really shit. So obviously someone somewhere hasn't plugged it in. And then they sit in a studio and they really just chat shit with each other. There's no real structure or any, or any development. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's also a form of intimacy, and people really enjoy that. Just like having that conversation sort of wash over you as you do your daily chores. And that's a form of podcasting. And then there's another type of podcasting, which I think is what we do, which is that we actually take a lot of time to research, to craft the episodes, to develop them and create a really comprehensive narrative structure. We have to really listen to each other, and so that when we're responding from a place of understanding and clarity. And if we don't, to ask the questions that will bring that about. Yeah. And then, of course, in terms of like a technical perspective, there's also, our mics are plugged in.
And thank God, because if it was me responsible, they would not be plugged in.
The mics are plugged in. I might give you a little taste of what it is when they're not plugged in.
Oh, yeah, to let people feel.
Just let people feel. This next sentence is going to be the mic's not plugged in. Just so you can get a little feel for what that is like.
Does stuff get picked up
by the cameras if it's not
Yeah,
plugged in?
absolutely.
Okay, so that's
yeah,
what it
so
is.
the camera has an inbuilt microphone.
Okay.
The phones have microphones. Also, it's a free camera setup. So we've got 2 iPhones and a wide, and they're all set up. And then, of course, you take all of that stuff, and then that still has to go through a process to make it what the show is. So, there's an editorial lens, right? So I not often, for every episode, I go away, do a paper edit before I ever get into the actual editing software. And then that paper edit then informs the actual edit. Otherwise, you're just cutting everything linear, and maybe something here towards the end actually belongs further up. So you're building like a narrative even at that stage. And then, of course, there's the mixing, the mastering, the grading, the export to make sure you're exporting at high res, and
uploading it in any number of other places.
Do you know what I mean?
I don't even know the things that you have to do. I just know this show wouldn't happen if you weren't doing all the things, and I watch you doing all the things and the amount of time it takes.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think that, podcasting is like a very simple thing.
Yeah.
And it's not a simple thing. It is production. It's full on production.
Yeah.
It's basically like shooting any other thing that you might shoot, you know. Maybe slightly less fancy because it is still the same location for 1 hour. And I'm saying all that because I feel like having a little whinge. Because I'm tired.
You have earned the rights to have a whinge after what I've seen in the last, apart from the 6 months since we've been going, just like what I saw in the last week and a half, you shooting 3 films worth of content.
Oh my God.
And then doing a podcast, ours and multiple others.
Exactly. So I think that was my little whinge. No. And I'm now ready to carry on the show. Also, how are you?
I am fine, but I am feeling for you because I know it's a lot. And it's just a lot. It's just a lot. This episode, it is that episode where we get back into our unfinished business of the season. Season 2 has been very different to season 1, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
In terms of how I feel we are now being seen or received.
Yeah.
We can now, it's not just us going back to the things that we didn't finish threads of, it's the stuff that people have reached out to us about. This season, it feels like there have been several standout themes. People really wanted to talk to us about raising men and boys. They also wanted to speak to us about what we shared on domestic violence, both queer domestic violence and just any kind of violence. And then there was the mixed race episode that we did this season that kind of went places we really did not expect.
No, we didn't at all.
Yeah, what were your thoughts on that whole?
Well, I'm just grateful that I don't do the social media. That's your trauma to hold on this show, because it really blew up on all the platforms: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn. It was just blowing up in ways that I couldn't have ever imagined. And there were people, obviously we're going to do a deeper dive into that because I think it warrants it, but there were great positive responses. We've met some great people with brilliant stories.
Yeah.
And then there was just the people who choose to willfully misunderstand, to be violent in their speech, and everything in between.
Yeah, definitely. I want to get into some of that. I mean, it's very hard not to get caught up in the difficult responses. But I do want to say, there are stories we need to go back to. People who I know have said they want to contribute to future episodes, and I really hope we can find ways of getting their stories in.
Yep.
Or if not, that there'll be some other kind of writing that comes out of it. But there were really quite violently anti-Black responses to some of the perspectives that you shared on historical views that really shouldn't be historical. And I feel like, some of the anti-Blackness that you received in response to it.
Yeah, proved my point.
Proved the point that you had as a teenager about supremacy and colorism and light skin privilege that mixed race people sometimes hold.
And how quick some people were to go to some of those anti-Black rhetorics and insults in the face of someone pushing back
100%.
against their own, pushing back in ways based on their own lived experience.
Yep.
And I was like, well, thank you for proving my point.
Exactly. And in fact, at some stage, Richie Brave of One Extra notoriety, who
We
is
love you, Richie
brilliant,
Brave.
he actually stepped in on
Yeah.
one of the discussions on our Instagram, which was just saying, like, are people really listening to what's being said? We get that what Aiwan has said here is maybe difficult for some people to hold, but look, we have a whole history of colorism.
Yep.
We have a whole history of light skin privilege.
Yep.
How does anybody learn or make sense of who they are if you can't even have a conversation about how these things impact you?
Exactly.
So we definitely need to be returning to that in a future episode. There is one other thing I want to mention, which was that we heard from Dr. Yvonne Guest, who's a mixed race therapy expert, who watched our entire episode and sent some really lovely feedback. But the reason I mention her is because she is actually doing a conference on mixed and multiracial heritage people in therapy on the 28th of November this year. And I think it's so important. I didn't realize how much hunger there was to get into this topic. And I think people will get a huge amount out of that. If I'm honest with you, I thought this episode was going to just completely be in the graveyard of summer posts on LinkedIn that no one would read. But what it made me realize is this is an issue people really want to talk about. And I think it's because mixed race people are the fastest growing population and people haven't had this conversation. So I just wanted to flag that conference because I think the hunger is there for it. Anyway, so apart from this mixed race episode, we are going to focus on several other things. And the first one is domestic violence. So let's talk about that. What stood out to you about the response to the domestic violence episode?
How little people understood the queer aspect of domestic violence and how it affects queer people, and that some of them had never even thought that it might be different, or that they might need to know something about the queer experience of domestic violence, or that it could even be different.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's almost like a complete black hole in the DV space.
Yeah.
Even from experts in the space. And that was quite staggering to me, because it kind of highlighted how little help there is for us when we're going through what can only be described as one of the roughest moments you will ever go through in a relationship. God forbid that you go through domestic violence in your relationship. You then go through that, and then nobody even understands, and nobody's prepared, and nobody's equipped, and they don't even know that it's a problem. So you're left holding a horrific experience on your own, not being understood, and in some cases being horrifically and even more violently misunderstood at your darkest hour of need. And I think that was the thing that saddened me the most, is that even the professionals didn't understand it.
Yeah. And I feel like that's maybe one of the reasons we've had so many people reach out from the professional space. Like, there was a general, I think even there were Black or people of colour who said this thing is not understood from our perspective, but you still see that there are organisations like Sister Space, for example,
that exist.
Or Southall Black Sisters, for example, that do exist to acknowledge that there is harm to racially or ethnically minoritized, mostly women in those settings. But it's still absent of the queerness. Like you said, that piece, I just don't hear it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I have to agree with you on that.
Yeah. So I think for me, the thing I want to see is more research, which there is doing. I mean, you listed quite a few in that episode of people who are doing work in the space, but more is needed, and it needs to be more integrated as well, so that it's a bit like how, you know, back in the day in the medical establishment, the only advice you would ever get about a particular thing, let's say meningitis, it has this particular rash, and they would say that it turns up red on skin. But of course, on black skin, it doesn't.
Yep.
And now we've got to a point where there's been enough agitation that it's standard now. I get things, medical things, and it says, and on black skin or darker skin, it will look like this. So please be aware. And it's just integrated into the mainstream. It will be good for domestic violence support to be integrated into mainstream domestic violence support as standard. So when you're giving out leaflets, it's also saying, these are the warning signs of domestic violence in queer or LGBTQ plus relationships. There are these additional things to look out for.
Yeah.
And that should be standard in all the leaflets, all the websites, all the videos, all everything. It should be standard, just like it is for black people in the medical establishment.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And I think the other question it raises is, you know, where does the burden lie for that education? Because if there's one thing that we've seen quite a bit since we published it is, and I suspect we'll have this on lots of topics, people coming to us and saying, we've seen you put out this episode. And of course we should expect that. It's great that people are engaging, but the risk for us now producing this thing was we put it there as one of many topics, and now there's sort of requests for us to kind of speak to the issue more.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite a tricky territory for us to navigate, actually.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with me is that, you know, you and I both have been there with the black thing, you know, where you're pulled out every October or any panel, as I've spoken about in previous episodes, where you're just pulled out to talk about being black. And it's like, I kind of already know what that is to be black, and there are other aspects to who I am. And I feel the same about this topic. We've spoken about it, but we're not professionals.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We've spoken about it, and we don't want to just talk about that. So there are people out there who, that is your career. Your career is therapy. Your career is health, mental health, or whatever it is. It is your duty and your job to know how these things manifest in queer relationships. And it is your duty and your job to work out what the solutions are to that and how to speak to people about that in the public domain. It's not for you now calling us every 2 seconds, come and talk about DV, come and talk about DV. I work in the entertainment industry. I don't want to talk about DV from morning till night. Tamanda does social research. She doesn't want to talk about DV from morning till night. That's not what we want to talk. And then half the time when they call you to come and talk about it now, what they want is for you to now be saying your trauma.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So that everybody can, and then they can feel good. Then they tick their box, and then they get that feeling. You know, when they talk about setting a goal, if you set a goal and you tell people, your body interprets you telling them like you've done it.
Yes. Yeah. And you reliving the trauma does the same thing.
But it also does it to those people. By hearing you say it, oh, I feel like I've done something because I sat in the space.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
I sat in the space to hear this person say that trauma, and I feel like I've done something. Meanwhile, you haven't done anything except sit on your bum. So,
it's true.
You know, please, that's not, we're not trying to come and talk about our trauma. We've already done that as the black thing. We've done it as the woman thing. We've done it in the gay season every June. That's not what we're trying to do around here. Everybody must do the thing that they're qualified to do.
I feel like my role today might be to just slightly, I like that you're speaking your truth as always.
Listen, I started this episode with a whinge because I'm tired. So that is the mood of this episode. So if you want to temper, please feel free to temper it.
No, I
don't mind.
I stand by everything you said. I actually stand by everything you said. But you know, this is a decision we made at the upfront of this podcast. The outset of this was, we're talking about the things that we want to talk about on our terms, because we don't want to be, you know, unlike where you have something where you're commissioned to produce something,
that's
the
different.
client tells you, talk about this, talk about something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think I had caught up with the fact that there's an audience who will also want to hear this, this, and this, right? And I think on the whole, that's a really brilliant thing. Our worst fear was that no one would listen.
Yeah.
But what I didn't anticipate, even though it's logical now, is that it would be like, oh, you've told this story, now tell it again.
And again. And then they'll find ways to weave it in. So now in Black History Month, talk about black people in DV. Then International Women's Month, talk about women and violence against women and girls. And then in Queer Season, talk about queer DV. And then every day DV. And then you wonder why at the end of the thing, you're feeling battered and bruised, no pun intended.
It's true.
Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It's terrible. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
There was one year I just taught black struggles, and then I got to
Was it 2020?
It must have been.
Or 2021.
I've never talked so much about being black in my life. I was like, I was like, do I even want to be black anymore? I'm like, a bit tired.
I think that there has to be, respectfully, a boundary. We have put out the story.
Yeah.
If you want to use it in your materials, it's in the public domain. If you want to
it's in the public domain, but don't be fucking taking snippets and putting it in things that you're selling.
Mm-hmm. That part.
There's something called IP, intellectual property.
And black people have had that stolen for generations, as long as been made property. So let's not do that now. Thank
exactly.
you. Okay.
Hello.
All right. I guess that's your response then. I think we might have finished this segment.
Yeah, I think we have finished this segment.
We did actually have a voice note from someone who listened to it. Do you want to listen to that?
Yeah, sure. Let's listen.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is actually from someone who wants to remain anonymous.
Maybe they'll be less irritable and whingy as I am currently.
I can tell you they were definitely not irritable. So,
good.
Okay, let's hear it.
So one of the episodes that really resonated with me is the one on domestic violence. And I think that domestic violence, particularly when it comes to people of colour like myself, is often avoided, or it's whitewashed, or it's just completely misunderstood. And for me, that episode was the first time that I actually felt seen with regards to my past experiences. Now, my past experiences don't shape who I am today. I don't see myself as a victim. I am absolutely a survivor. But I had years and years of therapy to help me to move towards the person that I am today. But it was the first time that I'd experienced, within your episode, such openness, such vulnerability, such honesty, but even in parts some humour, some really tasteful humour. And I was like, wait, it's not just me with a lot of the things that were said. Even though I've met people who have past experiences in domestic violence, it was the first time that I really, really felt seen. And I wanted to thank you both for opening that space, for allowing me to, because sometimes you get flashbacks and that's just unavoidable, but it allowed me, for when I then get flashbacks, to think of it in a slightly different way. So just such a powerful episode.
They have a really nice voice. Mm. They should be podcasting.
They do.
That person. Mm-hmm. Yeah, really smooth. Would be very nice to work with.
That's true. I want to say something on the content of what they said, which was, I think for me, that epitomizes the why we're doing it, because what you're hearing there is someone who has also been through it and says, it's not just me, and they feel less alone. And I think that that's quite different to hearing from a professional sector who are now, in the business of this thing and wanting it as a learning resource. You then become their learning tool.
Yeah.
Rather than, here's a thing. It's like, it landed with me. I receive it. Yeah. I see you, you see me. And it's for our community, right? It's for people who haven't always been seen in that space.
Yeah, and I think for me, I know I was saying I wouldn't say flippant. I was going to say I was quite flippant before this voice note, saying, don't be calling us to now be rehashing our trauma. I think where it changes slightly is when it's us for us. Like if there was a gathering of, black and brown people who have experienced domestic violence and they wanted us to come and talk into that space and be in conversation, fine. If it's a gathering of queer people who want to go deeper and talk about experiences or talk about resources and solutions and stuff like that, I'd always be up for that. I always say that when it comes to panels, I'm predominantly talking about the ones that want to extract, want you to rehash trauma, usually for a certain demographic of an audience who don't want to do anything, even though they've got the power to do things, and they want to keep you in that pigeonhole. I'm not talking about having conversations amongst ourselves, for ourselves, because that's healing and that's helpful and that's a beautiful thing. And I would always want to be a part of that
Yeah, you nailed that, because I think that's what you're saying. Some of this is healing and some of this is committing further harm.
Thank you.
And there's a real distinction. And even that thing which has the potential to be healing as well, I would say it's not every time you should do it.
Exactly.
Because that
you
also
can heal
be
yourself into...
Yeah, you know, there's sometimes there's vicarious trauma from being in those spaces just to talk. And sometimes it's not every day your life has to be about those things. No. And what I really valued in that voice note was that person said, I'm a survivor. I can live these things, still have flashbacks and still move on and experience joy and laugh and be a whole person and not become that whole story become my whole identity.
Exactly.
You know? And that's a really hard thing for someone who survived those things.
Of course.
You have to be really intentional about what you do with that stuff next. And,
and the flashbacks are real and they can come at any moment. And sometimes just some little thing can just trigger it.
Yeah.
Something really innocuous on the surface can trigger a flashback and put you back into that mental space. So yeah, you're right. You are a survivor. And survivors have scars, but they are scars. Yeah. It's not the actual wound anymore, but it's there as a reminder of the thing that you faced, you know.
And they themselves are not the scar. And that's what can easily happen when you're pushed into rehashing. Do you know what I mean? You start to think you and the scar are the same thing.
Yes, yeah. You know? It's a part of you, but it's not all of you.
Yeah, totally. Anyway, so here's to more like keeping complete control over what we want to do, when and how, right?
Yeah.
I guess that's the message for me.
Agreed.
Another thing that has come as we put this DV episode out has been this massive focus on domestic violence in the news.
Yes.
And in particular, there was this Guardian article not too long ago which highlighted that 2 in 5 of the people who had been arrested for last summer's racist riots, let's call it, had been reported for domestic violence and abuse.
That's like 40%.
Yeah.
That's almost 50%.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a staggering statistic. And
that's damning.
It is very damning, right? And I think the thing that's been extra interesting has been the development of this kind of analysis in some of the media reporting, because of course, one of the well-known tactics of the far right and people who are protesting immigration and asylum seekers settling in this country and being housed in hotels is they'll say, you're letting in a bunch of people who A, don't want to work, and B, are somehow a threat to our women and girls, right? So there's this like deep irony of how many of those people protesting are implicated in violence
against
women.
themselves threats to the women and girls in their lives.
Exactly. And so one of the things that's happened has been that a whole host, over 100 women's rights groups who work in that sector have come together to denounce some of the violent rhetoric of the far right recently. And they've published this statement and all this research on this area, just basically challenging all the misinformation that exists in that space, which is circulating online fast. And I think some of the things that stood out to me were things you may know, but more than 90% of perpetrators of rape and sexual violence are like actually known to their victim, first and foremost.
Yeah, that one I've always known. It's usually in the house or within your circle of friends and family.
Yeah, and then it makes you think, like a lot of us as women know that, right? We know it, unfortunately, by hard-won experience.
Exactly.
So it's like, how is it that you're going to claim all the rapes and sexual assaults happening in this country are the fault of migrants and asylum seekers? It's wild. Other stats that they released as part of this statement are that 1 in 2 rapes against women are by a partner or ex-partner.
Yep.
Again, no surprise to a lot of women out there. And then, of course, the other one, again, no surprise to many of us, is that 1 in 3 adult survivors of rape and sexual assault experience it in their own home, right? So I don't know, there's something so wild about releasing this episode at a time when domestic violence has been so much in the press and then has like collided with all the talking we've been doing about anti-immigrant sentiment, working class people, and for example, that episode we did on Tommy Robinson. So I was just wondering what you made of all that.
Oh God. How do I speak about this now? Because I've already done my little rant, and the next thing I want to say is going to be more ranting. I mean, I looked at the protests that have happened. So in the UK over this weekend, we had a massive, they will say that it's not a far right protest, but let's just say it was a protest of predominantly white people with St. George's flags. And if you know the history of the St. George's flag in this country, it was often used at times of great attack on Black and brown communities. So for Black people and brown people seeing that flag historically, it was always a sign that in that house, there's probably someone who's probably neo-Nazi, National Front, BNP. That flag doesn't spark
sense of safety.
A sense of safety. If you're walking through a neighborhood and you just see bare St. George's flags, particularly back in the day, that was your cue to either run as fast as you can through that neighborhood or not go through and find a different way around.
100%. And unless there was another reasonable explanation, like the Football World Cup is on.
Yes.
Which then it starts conflating in other ways. But most of us, if we see that flag, it's like in the US seeing like the Confederate flag.
Thank you. That's exactly what it is.
It's like, it shouldn't be that.
No.
It shouldn't have been co-opted
It's
by
just the
far
flag
right.
of England, really.
Yeah. Well, they have been a very violent nation at times.
Well, but
we
technically it's the flag of a country.
Yeah, exactly.
And it shouldn't necessarily have those connotations, but it does. And so during that protest, it was a lot of, because we've got this thing now where it's like, they're trying to reclaim the England flag, the St. George's cross. And so they're all wearing their St. George's flags and a few with Union Jacks. And
going around saying whose streets, our streets.
Yes.
And
which is laced with something that's not innocent at all and doesn't feel innocent. And the energy of the crowd, particularly some of the chants, some of them were bringing back National Front chants. So the National Front are an old school, racist, essentially neo-Nazi, far-right organisation that used to roam the streets in the UK, terrorising Black and brown people, kicking their heads in, smashing their shops, burning their shops, etc., just harassing
slogans
people.
like "Ain't no black in the Union Jack," things like that.
Yeah, niggas go home, all of that stuff. So these people are bringing some of those chants back. And it is there because we've got video footage. I'm not putting it in this episode because I'm not giving it the time of day, but there were people at this protest literally using National Front chants while having the St. George's flag tied around their neck like a cape, right? So that's the energy of that protest. Now, of course, you get the odd Black and brown people joining in. I'm not going to say anything about that because the less I say about that, the better, because it will go from a rant to me screaming and shouting and speaking in tongues. But let's just say that it was a shit show, essentially.
Oh, God.
But when I look at those people in the protest, when I look at the images of it, it just reminds me of football matches, particularly for us. I'm from Southeast London, and there's a football team in Southeast London called Millwall.
Oh, no.
Millwall FC. And that team is known for being full of neo-Nazi, fascist, far-right white guys. And when they go through the streets, they go through with that energy. It's those kind of chants, it's that flag, it's that rhetoric that they're going through the streets on. And you don't want to be a Black person crossing paths with Millwall fans on match day.
Did I ever tell you about the story of me crossing paths with them on match day right by their stadium?
Tell me the story.
On my own. Have I never told you this?
I don't think you have.
No. Well, okay. Years and years ago, I used to work for an organisation, and we did work with young people who in youth centres on estates or like in youth offending teams or whatever. And we had this London bus that was converted into a studio. And rather than set up and bring production equipment to a youth club, we would take the bus all fully kitted out. We were, it was back in the day, we were sponsored by like MySpace, M Audio, all these people.
And I've not heard that brand in a while.
Audio Technica as well were in there, I believe.
That's an Audio Technica mic right there.
It is.
Shout out the AT2040 dynamic mic.
Anyway, I had to go, I think I was asked to go and either cover and do songwriting teaching on the bus that day. And I'd been given which estate to go to. I didn't know that particular area. Is it Eltham?
Eltham.
Yeah.
That's a stronghold.
I knew of it by reputation, but
Yeah.
I didn't know it as in I don't know those streets to
Right.
be around them. So
As
it's
a
now
black
a
person,
Saturday.
you got to know those streets.
I
Because
knew
Eltham,
Yes.
SE9. No,
It's
no,
not
no.
a joke, yeah. And there's a long history to it not being a joke, which you know very well.
Yeah.
And very directly. Anyway, I turned up on the morning and I get off at the station and I don't really remember much like being on a train and it being full. All I remember is stepping out onto the platform and just seeing loads of big skinhead guys and a massive crowd all moving in one direction. And it was so confusing because most of the guys were looking at me and I was the only black person or person of color. And it almost was like they were stuck between wanting to aggress against me and being thoroughly confused as to why I was there on my own. Like I really felt like I explicitly, even as I talk about it now, have a moment frozen in my mind with a guy wearing a light blue shirt. I don't know whether that's their kit color or that's just happenstance.
I have I've tuned them out of my mind. I can't even tell you what Millwall looks like because I just can't. It's trauma.
Yeah, and you know the kind of look that
Yeah,
big
like,
burly
all
guys
right,
when they're
all
trying
right.
to be intimidating.
Yeah.
He's like puffing out his chest and, you know, looking at me away, but then also kind of slightly shrinking back at moments because I'm clearly looking so innocent and so also overwhelmed by all this. And all I'm thinking is, how the fuck do I get to the bus? Where the fuck is the bus? And realizing that I'm walking the same route as these guys and that I'm going to end up isolated under a bridge, like a subway kind of bridge on the way to this day. Anyway, I made it there fine. But one thing I'll never remember, and I think white people sometimes don't understand this, right? As black people, you are highly attuned to be hypervigilant to your surroundings and to be able to pick up energetically in your body when something is wrong.
Like women are also have the same thing
precisely with men, right? And that feeling I had that day, it's the same feeling I sometimes get when I go to a place. I remember in the run-up to Brexit, going to places with St. George's flags everywhere in Essex, in a very white area. Your body will immediately tell you, get the fuck out of here. It's like everything in your body is vibrating, telling you need to run.
Yeah.
You need to run. And it is primal and it's instinctive. And that's how so often we can see a small moment that a white person doesn't recognize as racist.
Yeah.
But we know
that
because we see the energy before an interaction.
Yes.
And we've felt it in our body and learned to keep ourselves safe.
Yes.
So that I remember feeling very strongly on that day.
Absolutely. And so for me, watching those protests, or whatever you want to call it, over the weekend, I was like, I know for a fact that a whole heap of you are going to go home and you're going to take out your frustrations on your women and your children. I already know.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it at the end of Millwall, because I live on the council estate in southeast London. I hear those men when they come home screaming and shouting at their wives, dragging them out, beating kids. You know what I mean? Like I've seen it.
Yeah.
And the aftermath of it, because my mum also was a preacher. She goes to these houses. She knocks on these doors. She would knock on doors and the woman opens and she's got a black eye and battered and bruised. Or the woman opens the door, the man appears behind her, makes a little sound. She quickly turns around like a deer in headlights.
Yeah.
And then just like shuts the door. And you know some shit's going to go down. I've seen it. I know that I have seen it. So
lived it.
While that stat is shocking, like 40%, but also at the same token, I'm looking at the protest, I'm looking at the guys and I'm like, it does make sense.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to slur anyone because I know that there are many men there who aren't. And I'm sure there are many people there who just genuinely think whatever they've bought into, that they want to save their country from God knows what. I mean, really, you should be saving your country from billionaires who are hoovering up resources, because that's not the asylum seekers. I can tell you that.
Exactly.
But you may innocently believe that that black or brown person in a hotel is the one who is stealing everything from you. That's on you. If that's your innocent belief, then that's your innocent belief. But
including your women who are not yours, by the way, and which requires some self-reflection.
Yeah, the person that you have committed your life to and that you say that you love, and then you're going home and beating the shit out of her. I don't know. I don't understand that kind of thinking, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
That's all I'll say on that, because I'll say some other shit that might just be very damning.
Okay. So speaking of patriarchy and violence against women and girls, the other big episode we got a response to was this one about raising boys and men. And in fact, we heard from an ex-teacher and a teacher who were actually together in a relationship who wanted to share their reflections. So should we have a listen to that?
Yeah, definitely.
This is an ex-secondary school teacher who now works in higher education, and my spouse, who is currently a secondary school teacher with leadership responsibilities. We listened to the Rigor and Flow podcast episode titled, How Do You Raise a Boy When You Don't Trust Men? And it prompted the following questions and thoughts from our own experiences in teaching. So when we listened to this episode together, you reflected immediately on the language and figurehead example of Andrew Tate. What is it that you are hearing from boys in your school right now, and how does it kind of differ to what was included in the podcast?
Andrew Tate really is quite a figurehead for teenage boys. I mean, that's been moved on from. I think quite a lot of the media fixation is Tate and his influence on boys, where in reality they're kind of looking at other prominent males really in a different way. I've seen quite a lot of examples of young boys being very impressed and fixated on with Trump and some of the kind of ideas behind the MAGA movement. The idea of they find him very entertaining, the way he would like troll individuals, or that he's banter the things that he's saying. And I think a lot of the quite reasonable accusations of quote unquote incel behavior, which they exhibit, they're actually quite able to cast off and say, well, I don't follow Andrew Tate. And quite a watermark for it has been, watermargin rather for a bit, has been when the legal situations Andrew Tate's been involved in, since that became so prominent, a lot of them really have moved away from him. And although they still have those behaviors, they don't put themselves into kind of box of being incels because they say, oh, well, I have mates, or, I have a girlfriend, so that doesn't apply to me, although they do exhibit really all of that kind of misogynistic behaviour.
And in what ways do you feel boys treat you differently to the female members of staff in the department?
This has been in two different environs that I've taught in. One which was much more socioeconomically challenged environment, and one which is now probably a lot more affluent, for want of a better word, kind of take, but both the same approaches with them. I'm the leader within a department which is based in the humanities, and so I've always led large departments that are very primarily staffed with women. And frequently, if you are seeing one of the boys that fit within this kind of system or profile, that they could be very resistant or defiant towards female teachers, which I've experienced none of. Quite frequently, if we have a student who's acting out and they're just refusing to leave the room despite reaching that sanction, I might be asked to come collect them, and they will respond immediately and stand up and just respond to it. There's a total difference between the treatment of female and male staff.
Yeah, that's something that I definitely experienced in my own teaching as well. So this was back in 2013, 2014, when I was teaching a secondary school that's very much similar kind of makeup of students as the ones you've had. And for context, as a 5'4", I was very 23, 24 at the time, female teacher, very much experienced those differences between how young boys were reacting to me in comparison to my male colleagues. And in particular, one example that the episode really reminded me of was when I had a student who was called back after class because he'd gone through the behaviour system, and he didn't want to do the task that I'd assigned him for the break time detention. So he flipped over a table, and as he walked out, sort of shouted, fuck off, you whore, at me. And basically, when we had kind of a reconciliation meeting with my head of department, it was very much whether or not he felt comfortable coming back into the classroom rather than any kind of apology towards me. And he did kind of express that if he can call his mum that all the time, then what does it matter? He didn't really see what the issue was. And what was strange was it was almost kind of because I'd followed through on everything. From then on, he just wanted to be in my classroom all the time. Like, he wanted to be part of my form group, but was still having issues with his female form teacher. So it's kind of did a bit of a 180, and I still feel like I'm reflecting on that experience a bit. But it just made me think about the different things that female staff have to go through in the secondary school system. And the final thing that we kind of reflected on together, and I wanted to ask you about, was, do you feel gender scripts are being rewritten in your school? And if not, why not?
To a degree, not at all in the school where I was previously and before, which had a lot more socioeconomic challenges. A lot of the gender scripts and gender identities were very much still as they were when I was at the school in the 90s. There'd been very little change with that. I found gender scripts changed more in schools with more multi-ethnic experiences, where there was a wider range of different communities within the school. Certain gender scripts are quite interesting, really, in that a lot of the perpetuation of the gender identities or roles are often being led by the younger females within the school. I mean, that is obviously a product of internalized misogyny, but a lot of the perpetuation seems to come from younger girls than it does from the boys, which I always find very surprising. There certainly is not the kind of view from even what you'd consider incel boys that women's place inside the home or any of the really kind of regressive stereotypes, in the same sense that sexuality is not really approached in the same way with that. There's no or very little bullying for a student being gay, but transphobia is the huge touch point, and that is something extremely combative as well. So it's interesting how much of it apes what is currently being espoused by right-wing media.
Okay, thank you.
There's so much
There's
there.
so much. Oh my God. Where do we begin?
I want to know what really stood out to you in that.
Well, there's a few things, which is the perpetuation by women, which we talked about. In fact, that's how we started off the episode, was the things that women say to men for not being a real man. And so it's kind of sad to see that is following through in this space at a young age, which then makes me think, well, where are they getting that from and who's teaching them that? The other thing was the shocking story of the boy who flipped the table and said, you know, fuck off, you whore, to this teacher who's no longer a teacher. But then his reasoning for that was that he can say it to his mum, so why can't he say it to her? Now, on one level, it's like, well, yeah, if you can say it to your mum and your mum's your primary caregiver that you see every day, then of course you would think that it's okay to say it to any person that you come across. But it's the fact that you're allowed to say that to your mum. So it's like, what is your mum doing at home in terms of discipline? And how low does your mum think of herself that she would allow her son, that she grew in her womb for 9 months and pushed out into this world through hard labor, to turn around and call me, your mother that grew you, tell me to fuck off, you whore. My Nigerian sensibilities can't tolerate that.
Yeah. It's so, I mean, my brain is kind of glitching right now because
On what planet?
Yeah, that's not the only thing that's glitching though. Like, I agree with that completely. Like, that could never have happened in my household. But I'm also thinking about a conversation we had with like a very well-respected youth worker who we were filming with a couple of weeks ago, who we know in our network, Michael.
Yes.
Do you remember?
Yes.
And he was saying how, as a youth worker, he used to provide support to families when these kinds of behavioural challenges were emerging.
Okay.
And if you remember, he said that what would happen was the parents would come in when a child had done something like that, and rather than calling them family counselling, he just called them parent crying sessions. And he said that the parents used to come and just cry their eyes out because they felt like a failure and they felt like the only one. But it turned out so many parents were struggling with managing their kids' behaviour and they thought they were the only ones. Now, I'm not saying that to excuse it. That's why my brain is struggling to reconcile. His argument was being a teenager is hard. Your emotions are all over the place. Trying to self-regulate is really, really difficult. I find it hard, but I'm just thinking of his voice in my head while I'm listening to that. And then the other thing, which is why I'm glitching, is that I think of all the work that's been done around safeguarding in education, and you see such a similar thing with the race based safeguarding in schools, it's often Black teachers who are being asked to educate students about racism
Yep.
and in the same breath experiencing racism.
Yep.
And then what we heard in this story from this teacher was, just like with the race stuff, she was expected to prioritize the students' comfort and
That
feeling
part.
okay with entering the classroom above her own experience of like very real violent misogyny.
Yeah.
Right?
Because their logic is that she's an adult and he's a child.
Yeah. And the safeguarding always goes in the direction of the child, but
Exactly.
it fails to recognize that staff have protected characteristics.
Yes.
Based on race or gender.
Exactly.
So this is why my brain is glitching. I'm trying to hold together where is the line of empathy of being a teenager is a hard, and nobody should be put through misogyny or racism as a precondition or expectation of being in the teaching profession. And the fact that she's not there now says a lot.
And that's why a lot of teachers are leaving, because the priority has been the child first to the detriment of the teacher. The teaching environment has become so terrible and not conducive to really teaching and doing the thing you want to do. So it's like, well, I'm just going to leave. And so the churn rate for teachers has been quite high.
Yeah.
And I think it will continue to be high.
Yeah.
Because I'm sorry, but I don't give a shit how old you are. You have no right to be treating other human beings like that.
Yeah.
And the worst thing is, if you don't learn it at home and you do it at school, fair enough for those first 16 years where it's statutory and there's a protective environment where people mollycoddle you. You get out into the real world, you're going to get punched. People are going to do stuff to you that you're not going to like in response to you being a dickhead. It's unacceptable that anybody should treat another human being like that. I don't give a shit how old they are, what position of authority they're in. There should be a basic standard of common decency towards your fellow human beings.
I have to agree with that. I actually agree with you. I don't know what I would do if my child was the one, but I was very interested.
If
by
my
the take.
child did that to a teacher,
I know, it'd be game over.
I'm sorry, no way. You are going, the shout that I will shout.
They're going direct to Nigeria, probably.
Listen, the shout that I will shout, I'm going to take you to that school and we're going to sit in conversation with that teacher until that child has really understood what they did wrong.
100%.
There might be some tears there.
I'll be by your side.
I can't tell you. Ah, my God, we're going to go back to Africa. We're going to do ancestral healing. You're going to be purified of that spirit of indecency and uncouth behavior.
Demonic behavior.
No way. God, Jesus Christ.
Okay, so we know how you feel.
Yep, strongly.
Strongly. And actually, I co-sign it.
Probably that boy is going to go and join the St.
He's probably
George's
gonna be
flag
on the
waving.
march. He's going to be on the march regardless of what colour he is.
Oh, God. And how that teacher held it down. Now the boy wants to be her very best friend. I'm like, that's great. And I'm all for a turnaround, a redemption story. And I like it. And they built a bridge. But she's still reflecting on it now because it obviously affected her.
Imagine how many years later.
I know.
Imagine.
Yeah. And I know them ones where you're just holding it down and you're just looking at the kid like, yes, I forgive you with the forgiveness of the Lord. But inside you're like,
have you experienced
if
that?
I grab you.
Have you experienced that as a teacher then, would you say?
Have I experienced that kind of fuck off you whore kind of thing?
Misogyny, yeah.
No, I can't say I've experienced that misogyny, you know.
Do you think some of that might be to do with being tall and masc presenting?
Maybe it's, yeah, because that's another thing, because this person said that she's 5'4" and stuff like that. That's no excuse though. But yeah, maybe something about being tall and maybe the way I present. Also maybe the subject I teach as well. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but I can't say I've experienced that. Have I experienced kids being rude? Yes. Have I experienced kids being belligerent? Yes. Teenagers are going to teenage. But that, I think, yeah.
But the reason I ask that about your presentation
Yeah.
is what I found so interesting was the teacher who described themselves as the head of a department or managing
Yes.
a team of humanities specialists who are largely female. He said that when he turns up in that space and he sees that behavior, it stops instantly.
Yeah, and I've seen that happen.
You have.
I've seen it happen in schools, but I don't know that the only time I've had another teacher have to come in to get the class to be quiet is if I'm new there.
Right.
Or I'm on supply.
Okay.
And that's to be expected because you don't know the kids, you don't have a relationship, and you need that teacher to come in and lay down the law. But if I'm established in a school, no.
Did you ever see it with other female, like women colleagues that you worked with?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say that I've seen that.
And were they, like, did they present as like
feminine
and smaller? Okay,
yeah. But then again, I've seen it with men who weren't like typically, I hate to say this, but they're not typically...
It's a masculinity thing then.
Yeah.
Okay, so
like maybe they're a bit slight, maybe their voice is a bit softer, and maybe the way they carry themselves is maybe with a bit of a nervousness. Because the one thing I always say with kids are closer to the womb than we are. So they're a bit more...
primal?
Can I say primal? they
sniff out.
No, they really can.
I was a nanny.
Yeah,
they sniff out. My first nannying gig.
Yeah.
They figured it out.
Listen,
this one's not confident.
And they can sniff it out.
Yeah. No, for real.
Yeah.
For real. Okay, well, the last thing I'll say on this then is just that we actually have an episode in season 3 that's going to delve deeper into some of this, the raising men and boys stuff, because it was also a really popular one. So we're going to be hearing from a researcher who actually does work in this space as well. And hopefully that will be something for people to delve into more.
Nice.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in to this episode. You can like, comment, and subscribe to keep up to date with Rigor and Flow. And of course, if you're on audio, please do leave us a comment and a 5-star review.